Hi everyone, it's me, Dr. Whimsy, and today we are talking about some simple things that you can do to help with mood if you're suffering from a little anxiety or depression. Here are some great tips that I think can just help you feel a little bit better and will not interact in any way that your doctor might have a problem with, because we need to be careful, particularly in patients who are depressed, if they're on any medications. We never want to recommend anything that may interfere with a medication doing its job. So here are some simple things that you can do to improve your mood that will not interact with any kind of medication you're currently on. The number one thing that I tell people to do when they're struggling with their emotions, if they're having anxiety, depression, anything like that, is I immediately go to daily habits. Yes, it's true that sometimes we can become depressed or upset if we're struggling with real challenges in our life. If a loved one is sick and you're the primary caregiver, I see that a lot. People become burned out and depressed when they feel that others are relying on them, but they don't get a lot of nurturing for themselves. That's a population that I often see struggling with these types of challenges. If you're having financial stress, that's definitely something we see can lead to depression and stress. Life in general can be stressful. So, how can we help? How can we help, and how can we do it in a way that doesn't interact with anything you may be doing? Number one thing I do is I clean up people's diets. There are a couple of things that we tell people to either discard or reduce in order to help with mood. And top of the list is junk food. Number one thing you can do to help with mood is stop consuming processed foods, particularly ones that are high in sugar. And the reason is because we now know that making sure we have a stable blood sugar can have a dramatic effect on mood. So simply the act of eating foods that have a low glycemic index, preferably in their least processed form, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains. That is something that we can do to stabilize our blood sugar. And when we stabilize our blood sugar, we improve our mood. So stop consuming sugar and foods that are processed high in glycemic load. Sugar, white flour, processed refined carbohydrates would fall into that category. That is the first thing you can do. Instead, replace those with whole, nutrient-dense foods. The second thing you can do to improve your mood, we definitely didn't like finding out about this one when I was working on my stress challenges, and that is to reduce consumption of caffeine. Caffeine can have a dramatic impact on mood, particularly if you suffer from anxiety. Caffeine is a vasoconstrictor, so it can have an effect on how much oxygen is actually getting to the brain, and that's not so good. But it can also increase norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are excitatory neurons, which can cause agitation. But there are also hormones that can increase heart rate, are associated with hypertension, higher blood pressure, and basically not something you need. It's kind of like adding fuel to a fire when you're already stressed out. So number two, refrain from consuming foods high in caffeine. That includes soda pop, which of course we nixed because of the sugar content. But if you say, well, I'll just use a diet soda instead, sorry, diet soda is processed food. It contains chemicals that are not good for you and contains caffeine. Well, I'll just do diet soda without caffeine. Still a processed food. Still not a good idea. So number one, avoid foods that have a high glycemic load or refined carbohydrates, processed food, junk. Number two, avoid foods that contain caffeine. Number three, and this is one that I get a lot of pushback against, and that is avoid alcohol. Sometimes when we're stressed and we're depressed, the first thing we do is we want to unwind, maybe have a glass of wine or a couple shots of tequila, whatever your proclivity is. Uh, that's not necessarily going to help you feel better. In fact, alcohol is a depressant. It can have a profoundly depressive effect on people suffering from who already have anxiety and depression, because it can wreak havoc on our blood sugar, which, as I mentioned before, it's very important for you to keep your blood sugar as stable as possible. So you really want to be refraining from alcohol if you can, particularly if alcohol has been a challenge in the past. Number 4, what I would add to that is recreational drug use, particularly if you've had a past history of drug use. We can sometimes become stressful. We want to feel better, and you want to feel better right away. If you're somebody who has in the past used recreational drugs, that's something that needs to get looked at, because now the person who has the anxiety and depression is self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. You're creating another problem. Instead of dealing with the underlying problem, you're creating another problem. So we want to refrain from recreational drug use as well. Number 5, begin taking in a good meditation practice. I recommend people meditate twice a day, morning and night. 20 minutes usually does it. I personally like the breath technique, or the Vipassana technique, a simple breath technique. I'll link that below. But certainly meditation has been used by just about every culture in the world, and every religion in the world has a type of meditation. Find the one that works best for you, that resonates for you, and do it diligently twice a day. And finally, number 6, spend time in nature. Believe it or not, simply spending time in nature, ideally getting your heart rate up. If you can make it a cardio workout by hiking in nature, that would also increase serotonin, increase dopamine, because we now know that people who spend time in nature have an increase in the neurotransmitters that we associate, or the brain chemicals that we associate with improvement in mood. So being in nature, being physically active in nature, hiking, jogging, moving, would have a dramatic impact in mood. So let's review everything. We want you to clean up your diet, eat foods in their whole natural forms, predominantly plant-based. Avoid sugar, processed foods, prepackaged foods if you can. Number 2, we want to avoid caffeine. The only caffeine that I think people do well on is low-dose caffeine in organic green tea. Number 3, we want to avoid alcohol. And number 4, recreational drugs if we can. Number 5, we want to get out in nature. And I think I had another one there. I can't remember what it was. I seem to recall that I had 6, but there you have it. My tips for how to become healthier and happier, dealing with stress and anxiety without the use of pharmaceuticals. I want to thank you for watching this brief discussion about anxiety and meditation. I forgot that was the one, meditation. 6 tips. That's what it was. 6 tips. I could add a few more if I like, but we'll leave it at 6. Be sure and share, like, subscribe, and tell me what you do to reduce stress and avoid anxiety. Thanks for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.